Sunday school time. It is your favorite time of the week. I can just sense it in your bones. Okay, so this class has been, it's a class on Christian apologetics for those of you that haven't been here. And we started talking about the person of Jesus. And so if you got people in your life who don't believe in God, they don't believe in Jesus, they're not Christians, there's a lot of different ways to have a conversation with those people. Because I think one of the goals I would guess that everyone has is you've got somebody in your life who's not a Christian, and maybe you'd like for them to engage in something that's really important and precious to you, your faith in Jesus Christ. So that's what the whole discipline of apologetics is about. It's about how to talk to people who are skeptics, or how to talk to people who are just, not even engaging in Christian issues. And so we said, let's start with Jesus. There's lots of different ways to start, but kind of the heart of the heart is talking to people about, what do you make of Jesus? Like, who is he? What did he come for? And we noted that there's basically no historian, Christian or not, who says Jesus wasn't a real person. Right? Anybody who says that is just way outside of the mainstream of historical thinking. We walked through that, right? All the historical, non-biblical evidence for that. And then we sort of said you got to conclude that Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or he is who he says he is, the Lord. But then there's some legitimate, like, okay, well, what about the New Testament? Is the New Testament accurate? So we've spent the last month or so, 3-4 weeks, talking about, is the New Testament accurate? We're going to try to finish that section today, because I feel like we've been moving pretty slow on this question of, is the New Testament accurate? And then we're going to move on to some other techniques to talk to people who are skeptics. One of them is about miracles. So you'll see where we end today is going to lead into a discussion about what do you make of miracles. And just getting somebody who is your average 21st century, Northeast Tarrant County resident to start thinking about the supernatural. Because a lot of people aren't really thinking about that. They live their lives just kind of the material world is all that there is, but there's a lot of reason to believe that there is more than just, what you can sense with your taste, touch, smell, all that, okay? So I want to try to finish this question on, is the New Testament reliable? We've talked about before that there's all these ancient manuscripts we have, before the printing press and whatnot. And one of the things we noted is if the New Testament was just, a bunch of made up stuff, that we would see a lot of variables, a lot of variations amongst these manuscripts. That Bobby LaPena's manuscript would have Jesus walking on the water, but Tom Stewart's manuscript wouldn't. That type of disagreement would tell us, okay, there's a problem potentially with the story of Jesus walking on the water if there were lots of variations, right? But what we don't find is variations. We find remarkable agreement. So this is a very important point. We talked about the sort of massive load of these manuscripts, that the New Testament events are the best documented events in human history from antiquity. So when we think about, we talked about, Homer's Iliad, for instance, and how widely accepted that is, and that the New Testament is something like, 50 times better in terms of documentation than those events in Homer's Iliad, which is kind of the best documented events in antiquity. So we talked about that, and then we've been talking about just let's think about what the New Testament has to say, and let's think about it from a logical standpoint. And are the New Testament authors lying to us? And this is a really important question, because establishing the reliability of the New Testament is really, really key to somebody who is very skeptical. for obvious reasons, because the primary documents we have about our faith are in the New Testament. We've got the record of the apostles, the first apostles, and they're telling us about what Jesus did, and they're telling us about what it means. And so if we don't accept its reliability, we really have nothing left. This is one of the great tragedies of the 21st century church, of course, is there's so many Christians who are questioning so much of what's in the New Testament. And if you cut the New Testament out, you really have nothing left in which to stand on. So we're thinking about skeptics, we're thinking about people we love, and we're thinking about how to talk to them about our faith in Jesus. And that's what this whole class is all about. So we're right in the middle of this section of just looking at, let's think about the evidence in the New Testament, and then let's ask ourselves some questions about it. All right, so one of the things that we talked about last week is that the New Testament documents themselves claim to be eyewitness accounts, right? So the New Testament writers themselves are saying, I was there, I saw this. And we have several quotes that we looked at last time. So the New Testament authors claiming to be eyewitnesses is really important, right? They're not saying like, and I heard this, and it's not a game of telephone. They're saying, I was there. I saw it. Siri wants me to try again. I'm sorry, Siri. At least it wasn't my own Siri. That happened to me during my sermon at 5 o'clock a couple weeks ago. Like Siri's like, oh no, you're wrong. Like, that is what everybody thinks. They're probably not wrong, though. Okay. So just the thing to remember about eyewitness accounts is that these things did not take place kind of on an out-of-the-way place at an out-of-the-way time. I mean, the main events that the New Testament describes are very public events. You can think about Jesus feeding the 5,000, for instance, right? Like huge multitudes. The Sermon on the Mount. Our Lord carrying the cross through the streets of Jerusalem. The resurrection itself, and then St. Matthew tells us that there are all these other people that start rising from the dead, and they're coming out of their tombs. These are very public events. And so the thing about an eyewitness account is that if it doesn't happen according to what the eyewitness says, there are other eyewitnesses who can say, no, it wasn't quite that way. So if you were in 8:30 service, we have little baby Nora there today, and she's born 11 days ago, awfully sweet little thing. But if you were there, you saw it. And you can verify, yes, we said a prayer for her, and she's 11 days old, and her mom and dad are grinning from ear to ear, and everything about it, right? You can tell the story. If you weren't there, you can say, oh, I don't know, right? I'll have to hear it from somebody who's there. But if somebody tells the story the wrong way, actually Nora wasn't there, or actually it didn't happen that way. Only the mom came forward and not the dad. The eyewitnesses help to verify the veracity of the story. So the eyewitnesses in this case, the authors of the New Testament are telling the story, and one of the things that's important to note is that we don't have other contemporary accounts at the time that the New Testament is written that say, actually, all of this is bogus. Actually, none of this took place this way. Or actually, it took place this way, but actually in a very different way. We don't have any contemporary accounts that say that. So that itself lends us to the idea, like, if there was somebody who witnessed this, they would tell us something different. So it's an argument from silence, and arguments from silence are not the strongest arguments, obviously. There's a lot of potential reasons why somebody could be silent on something. But that itself is a really important point, right? That friendly eyewitnesses or unfriendly eyewitnesses could say, actually, you got the story wrong, okay, for different reasons. But the point is, people want the truth to come forward. That is always the case, they have different perspectives, but the people want the truth to come forward. What we don't see is a lot of contemporary accounts. We see some later accounts of people several centuries later saying, actually, no, you got this wrong. And there's what are called spurious works or false gospels or those type of things. Those are all dating to much, much later. Everybody follow me on that? Okay. The second thing that we notice, one of the other things we notice, is that if the New Testament itself is made up, right, and you're telling a story, chances are you want to tell the story in a way that's really flattering to yourself, and it doesn't make you look like a complete fool. All right? And one of the things we notice about the New Testament is that there's all kinds of stories in there that actually introduce difficulties in the narrative. All right? They challenge some of the things that we think we might have seen in the New Testament. So I have this here, for instance, Jesus, it openly says that he couldn't work miracles in Galilee. It says that some people think he's absolutely insane. We know that lots of people are writing him off as he's out preaching in the countryside. They're like, nope, don't want anything to do with you. Remember when Jesus in John chapter 6 is talking about eating his flesh and drinking his blood? The people are like, what are you talking about? This is absolutely nuts. And then St. John tells us a lot of people walk away. They're like, you've gone insane. And they don't continue with him, right? He's saying things like, I don't know what's going to come, or I only have limited information. I mean, that's one of the things he says in today's gospel, right? Like he says, I don't have unlimited authority yet. It's not mine to grant who's going to sit at the seats in the kingdom of God. He says that in today's gospel. This righteous anger that he displays, when he goes in and he turns all the stuff over in the temple, Breaking this. This is like a St. Lawrence relic. I'm breaking it. Sorry to if anybody in the room built it. He's in a moment of despair on the cross, something theologians make a whole lot about. Why does Jesus cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right? So it doesn't seem clean. It doesn't seem neat. There's lots of jagged edges to the New Testament story. And if this was a highly redacted story, we would think the editors could have cleaned up some of those jagged edges. And it's true for the first apostles. Remember, the whole thing is a little flow chart from Jesus to the first apostles. And all we know about Jesus is what the apostles tell us. Right? Jesus doesn't write a book. The only thing we know about him comes to us through the apostolic witness. And the apostles themselves are the editors of these books, and you would think that if they were interested in highly edited stories rather than conveying the truth, gosh, wouldn't they make themselves look a lot smarter than they do? So a lot of the witness comes through St. Peter, for instance. And St. Peter is everybody's sort of, lovable buffoon in the New Testament, the guy is inserting foot into mouth repeatedly. So if you were expecting to read a highly edited story rather than a truthful one, you would think that some of these things would have been edited out. And this itself is a good argument for the reliability of the New Testament. Is everybody following what I mean on that front? Right? So if you're telling a story about yourself, chances are you're going to tell a story that makes you maybe look good. Unless you're mean,
You delete some of those texts.
Did anybody watch Saturday Night Live last night with the John Gruden opening? Nice, right? So people do stupid things. That's what's real. We know that. If you know yourself, maybe y'all aren't quite as stupid in your behavior as I am, but we all do stupid stuff. And so the New Testament capturing that, I think, is a great argument for its reliability. It's not kind of the fishing story where everything goes perfectly, right? And aren't we so smart? Anybody got anything they want to say about that before we move on? Okay. There's a couple of other things to note as we're reading through. So one of the things to note is St. Paul is writing these letters, and if you've read some of Paul's letters, you know that he is, look at this is kind of fun, this is what fell out of here. Got a jewel, treasure. If you're reading along in the New Testament, you know he can kind of rant and rave, and he gets himself worked up about stuff. But he notes several times, and we notice as we read, that he is differentiating between what his own opinion is and what the apostolic witness is. Right? So he's saying several times, this is my opinion. This is not doctrinal. If I had a preference, this is how it would be. So he's very clear to differentiate between what he believes is his own opinion and what he believes is the authentic apostolic witness. Right? Why would he need to do that if it's all out of his own mind? Right? So again, you can conclude like, oh, well, it's just because he's insane. All right? St. Paul's insane. That is what some people conclude, but that's the only possible explanation for why he would want to do that. Otherwise, he's telling us the truth. All right, so he's saying, here is my opinion. You can take it or leave it. Here is what it is. And so in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, he specifically does that. I know that, but there are several other places as well. Another thing to notice, just kind of zooming out and looking at some of the history of what happens after the apostles are out preaching or whatever, is if they made these things up, we would expect that some of them would have recanted somewhere along the way. All right, so if you got to put your life on the line for some truth, like I think it usually means you really believe in the truth of what you're saying. The apostles, of course, don't get rich, from apostolizing. Apostling around town doesn't. In fact, it gets them kind of thrown in jail, beat up. These guys are not super popular. People don't like them. They get thrown out of town after town after town. They get killed in really awful ways. And what we don't see is we don't see any of them kind of say, just kidding. Yeah, so we hatched this plot, and I don't want you to kill me, so actually it wasn't true. We never, ever see any of the apostles say that. One after another is getting killed in really, really awful ways, and all of them go to their death insisting that what they are saying is the truth. Every single one of them. And they're willing, even at the point of sword or getting boiled alive or all the other fun ways that they get killed, they don't ever say, actually, that whole thing about the resurrection, it's just all made up. We were sitting around a room one night, we had too much wine, and we concocted the whole thing. And yeah, so I'm backing off of it, don't kill me. We don't see that. Like, they're like, okay, if you gotta kill me, you gotta kill me, but I'm not stopping to say what I know to be true. And the actually apostles, in the first part, you read this time and time again, Peter and John they keep getting drugged back to the temple, and they're like, stop it. Stop saying the things you're saying about Jesus. And they beat them up, and then they release them and say, okay, don't say anymore. And what does St. Peter say repeatedly? I can't do anything else. This is what I've seen. This is what is true. We wouldn't expect that if it was just like a story that you and your buds made up around the campfire one night, right? If push came to shove, chances are you'd back off the story. The fact that we don't see that happen itself is a really compelling witness to what they're telling us. They don't crack under pressure.
After the resurrection.
Yes.
Before, obviously, Peter denied him 3 times, even to a little girl.
Yes. So once given the Holy Spirit, we see a much different group of apostles who are ready to go and do what they were taught and trained to do. Right? So this itself is a great sort of witness that, again, I mean, you just kind of think about your own life. Like, me and my brothers would lie to my parents all the time. And they would easily sniff that out. You know, you put one brother, I had 2 older brothers, and they just put us in different rooms, and it's real easy to sniff out a lie, you know, like, because your details are very different. And mine was always like, he hit me, you know, he hit me first. And I was the youngest, so I usually got away with that. But, you know, it's really easy to sniff out lies when there's inconsistencies in stories, but we don't see that. One of the other things so a lot of people who are skeptical just say things like, you know, all of this just kind of written later by people with an agenda in the church, you know. But one of the things that we can also notice about the New Testament is that itself, it describes a really strong internal struggle about key points of doctrine that are happening in the life of the early church. And so, wouldn't we think that if this was all written later, that a lot of these struggles would have been cleaned up by the time the New Testament was written? So, for instance, you know, the story of the Acts of the Apostles, for instance, is the story of the first days of the church. You know, are the Jews and the Gentiles both welcome in the covenant, in the new covenant of Jesus' blood? I mean, that itself is a massive struggle, and there's people taking all kinds of positions on it. And the church isn't sure which way to go. But if this was written later, wouldn't that have all been clarified? I mean, it would have been just very easy to insert one more sentence into the Sermon on the Mount to clarify this point. If you were a later writer, or the key point is, does everybody have to get circumcised? Right? The adult convert males who are non-Jewish, do they have to get circumcised? Again, it's really easy. Like, all you have to do if you're, you know, one of the writers of this made-up New Testament is just write one more sentence in, and it solves the problem for the early church. Women in the church's ministry itself is a big, big challenge, which continues obviously in our own day. Which books are to be included in the New Testament? I mean, it would have been very easy to have, if you're a later guy and you're writing in the name of St. Paul, why don't you just write which books are supposed to be in the New Testament? Why do we have to battle it out? We've got all these heretics who think, you know, this way, this is the only books that have to be in, and the church really struggles. This question about how is it that Jesus is fully God and fully man, it takes a full 400 years for the church to figure out. It would have been very, very easy for somebody to just write one more sentence into John chapter 1 to clarify this point. Or to edit part of Colossians chapter 1 that confuses Arius as he is proclaiming his message. Will is sad that it took the church so long. We are too, Will. So, like, why weren't some of these things just clarified? If it's made up later, if somebody's writing this around the year 250, it would have been very easy to know what the issues are, and we would just have a manuscript that cleans up all of this. But we just don't have it, right? So what we have is kind of a take it or leave it. This is the New Testament document. Now we've got to struggle with its interpretation. That itself, I think, tells us, okay, we're telling you what we know at the time we know it. And we're going to have to figure everything out together from here. Is everybody following this?
Yes.
Everybody getting a good nap between services? Anybody got anything they want to say? Any questions? It's just so clear. My arguments are so influential that everybody's good. Okay, let's talk about mythology for a minute. We've got one of the things that you hear people say sometimes is that the New Testament and the Gospels specifically are just sort of a collection of mythology from the ancient Near East. C.S. Lewis writes pretty extensively about this, and he's very helpful because he says, anybody who really has read a lot of ancient mythology doesn't say that the Gospels are myths, because they don't take the form of ancient myths in any way, in any recognizable way. And these are both the Greek myths, the Roman myths, the Norse mythology, where you get our boy Thor from. The mythology itself has a different shape and form. So they want to communicate in sort of the mythologists you can think about, once upon a time, right? Like there isn't in the 6th year of Quirinius, when Quirinius was governor of Syria, this is not the way mythology begins. It begins once upon a time, right? Myths want to communicate sort of generalized, grand, sweeping truths. They're not set in specific places with specific historical figures or specific locations. And the Gospels just have far too many historical, and we talked about this earlier in the series, far too many historical details that are true and accurate to be understood as myths. So when people say this, it's sort of a misnomer, because what they're trying to say is they really just doubt the miraculous events that are described in the Gospels. They doubt the supernatural realm and the supernatural world, that it can intersect with the natural world. But the New Testament isn't really a good candidate, or in none of the Gospels anyway, are good candidates to be described as myths. But sometimes you'll hear people say this, so I just wanted to address that a little bit and just say that people who read myths don't say things like this, the ancient myths. What the people who are skeptical on this point are saying is that they really just believe in the natural world versus some type of supernatural possibility. And so this is where I want to go with the class, kind of come out of the question, is the New Testament reliable? And just talk about the natural world versus the supernatural realm. What do we mean by that? And then where is it observable? And what I want to do is dig down on this question through miracles. All right. So let's just define our terms real quick, and then we'll break for the day. We'll start talking about miracles next time. But basically, what most 21st century people believe in is the material world. In anything, and they believe they're sort of naturalists, you might say. Just a natural event happened, and it set in motion all subsequent events. Now, there's a lot of good evidence for the Big Bang, and we can get to that at this. If y'all are not, bored to tears, we can talk about how we understand the Big Bang and evolution and all of those, which are very important theories and something that Christians need to tackle. But just this is the naturalist view, that everything that happens in the universe is the result of a natural process. It's just biology, it's just physics, it's just chemistry. All right?
Who lit the fuse?
For the Big Bang. So this is important to understand, because this is what the vast majority of people are opting out in our culture of religion based on this understanding of reality. All right? Now the Christian and people of faith say, yes, there's clearly a natural world, and we're not against the sciences in any way, shape, or form. We're all about the search for truth that takes place in the sciences. So we're in no way against it, and anyone who attempts to pit theology against science is barking up the wrong tree, because that is not an accurate or faithful way of understanding the two different disciplines. So supernaturalists, which would be everybody in this room and anybody who believes in God, believes that yes, there's this natural world, but that interruptions and interferences do take place, and can take place in this system of our universe from some other system outside of it, right? a system that is not observable by a telescope, or not able to be arrived at by an equation. Okay? So a supernaturalist just believes that the natural world was created or it's derived from a supernatural entity. And so miracles then are interventions that go beyond natural laws, and miracles are consistent with nature beyond natural law, just beyond the actual natural system itself. So this is really important, because what we're getting into is less talking about Jesus, talking about is the New Testament reliable. We're really getting more towards a philosophical understanding of what is reality. And is reality just everything that you can touch, taste, sense with your five senses, or is there something beyond that? And this really is the key question, and to get to the answer on this, you've got to go down some philosophical roads and talk about what's necessary for us to understand it. How do we arrive at the place where we currently are? So we're going to spend some time doing that via the lens of miracles. I'll tell you about some studies that have been done about miracles, and there's all kinds of really, really compelling evidence for miracles that don't have a purely natural explanation. Things happen in the world that can't be explained by natural process or natural phenomenon. And that itself is a really important point for talking to somebody who is who's skeptical about the whole thing. All right, I think I'm done. It's time to wake back up, get on with your day. Some of you are going to church. Anybody got anything they want to say? Any questions? Okay, wake back up. Let's get it. Y'all have a good day.